"Can I share this table?" the woman asked softly, balancing her tray with practiced care, the metal leg beneath her jeans clicking faintly against the cafeteria floor. The janitor looked up from his coffee, startled by the sound before he even saw her face. For a moment, the noise, the question, the crowded room, all of it seemed to pause. If you're still watching by the end of this story, you'll understand why his reply stunned her, and why moments like this remind us to slow down, listen, and never judge too quickly. And if stories that touch the heart matter to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. You're helping more stories like this find the people who need them. The cafeteria sat on the edge of a busy transit hub, a place where office workers, travelers, and shift laborers overlapped for a few minutes of warmth and cheap food. The janitor, whose name tag read Eli, usually chose the smallest table near the window. He liked watching people pass without being seen himself. Years of cleaning floors after everyone else had left taught him how invisible a man could become. He nodded slowly, then gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Of course," he said, voice calm, almost gentle. "Tables are meant to be shared." She smiled, relieved, and lowered herself carefully into the chair, setting her tray down with precision. Her posture was straight, disciplined, but her eyes were tired in a way Eli recognized. He'd seen that look in mirrors long ago. The cafeteria noise returned in waves of forks clinking, conversations overlapping, laughter bursting and fading. She took a breath before eating, as if bracing herself, and Eli noticed how she positioned her metal leg slightly back, minimizing the space it took, minimizing herself. For a while, they ate in silence. Eli didn't rush it. Silence wasn't empty to him, it was a place where stories waited. Finally, she glanced up and caught him looking not at her leg, but at the scar just above her eyebrow, a thin white line that spoke of something sharp and sudden. "I hope I'm not in your way," she said quickly, the words practiced, like armor. "I can move if you're not in the way," Eli replied, without hesitation. "You're right where you're supposed to be." The words landed heavier than either of them expected. She blinked, fork paused midair. "People don't usually say that," she admitted. "They usually look first, then decide." Eli gave a small smile. "I used to look first too," he said. "Then life taught me better." Something in his tone invited trust. She introduced herself as Mara. She had just finished a physical therapy session across town and stopped here because it was close and familiar. This place didn't ask questions. Eli nodded, listening, the way he always did when someone finally spoke. He told her his name only when she asked, as if it were something private. As minutes passed, conversation grew, tentative at first, then warmer. Mara spoke about the accident overseas, about the blast she never heard coming, about waking up to a different body and a future that felt suddenly negotiable. She talked about how people thanked her for her service but avoided sitting too close, how admiration could still be a kind of distance. Eli didn't interrupt. He didn't offer pity. He simply listened, his eyes steady, his presence solid. When she finished, she laughed quietly, embarrassed by the sudden flood of words. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to unload all that on you." "You didn't," Eli replied. "You set it down for a minute." "There's a difference." She studied him then, really studied him. His hands were rough, scarred in places that didn't match janitorial work alone. His shoulders held a weight that mops and buckets couldn't explain. "You talk like someone who's been through things," she said. Eli looked down at his coffee, the steam curling like memory. "I have," he said. "Different uniform, different war." That was when the room seemed to tilt slightly, when Mara felt the conversation shift from polite to profound. Eli told her about years spent overseas, about a command he never wanted and decisions that still visited him at night. He spoke of coming home to a world that had moved on, of losing friends whose names were now etched in stone, of losing himself for a while after that. The janitor's job wasn't a fall from grace, he explained, but a landing, a place to rebuild without noise. Mara listened now, her own tray forgotten. She saw him differently, and not as a man cleaning after others, but as someone who had chosen humility over applause. "So," she said softly, "what made you stop looking first?" Eli met her gaze. "The day I realized everyone is carrying something heavy." he said. Some of us just carry it where others can see. The words hit her harder than the explosion ever had. Her throat tightened, and she looked away, blinking fast. All her life since the accident, she had been the visible only of the leg, the cane, the questions. Sitting across from this man, she felt seen without being reduced. The cafeteria noise faded again, replaced by something quieter and deeper. A group at a nearby table laughed loudly, one of them glancing over a little too long. Mara shifted instinctively, shrinking. Before she could apologize or move, Eli spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Stay," he said. "You don't owe anyone your absence." That was the moment she would replay later, the moment that stunned her. Not the words themselves, but the certainty behind them. No one had ever claimed her presence as something necessary before. Tears threatened, and she laughed to cover them, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You know," she said, "I almost didn't ask to sit here." "I'm glad you did," Eli replied. "I almost said no out of habit." "I'm glad I didn't." Time moved strangely after that. They talked about small things, their favorite meals, bad movies, places they missed. The heaviness lifted, replaced by an easy understanding. When they finally stood to leave, Mara adjusted her balance, and Eli instinctively steadied the chair without making a show of it. Respect, not rescue. As they walked toward the exit together, a young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering loudly about the metal leg. The mother flushed, mortified, pulling him closer. Mara braced herself for the familiar sting. Before she could react, Eli knelt down to the boy's level, smiling. "You know," he said gently, "that leg has been to places most of us only see in movies. It's pretty amazing." The boy's eyes widened, or replacing curiosity. Mara felt something inside her heal just a little. Outside, the afternoon light stretched long across the pavement. They paused, unsure how to end something that felt unfinished. "Thank you," Mara said finally. "For the table, and a broken bar, everything else." Eli nodded. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, half joking, half hopeful. She smiled, a real smile, full and unguarded. "I'd like that." As she walked away, the rhythmic click of her leg no longer sounded like an apology. Eli watched her go, then turned back inside, heart lighter than it had been in years. He picked up his mop, not as a symbol of where he had fallen, but of where he stood, grounded, present, open. And here's the truth that ties this story back to where it began. Sometimes the most life-changing moments start with a simple question at a shared table, and the courage to answer honestly. If this story moved you even a little, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You never know who might need to hear the next Tonya, and you might just help them find their place at the table.